Hello boys and girls, so Forspoken is coming out tomorrow, and before it does, I just wanted to share my thoughts on it basically, because I am so torn with this game. I really want this to be good. When it was first announced, I was one of the biggest fans. It's basically, you're transported into this mysterious world, you've got tons of spells and magic to use, you've got all these weird enemies to fight and these mini-bosses around the map, it's open world. It sounded really good. It's kind of like Skyrim mixed with like Horizon Zero Dawn. I mean, that's the vibe I was getting, so I was thinking like, okay, like this is something I'm going to be excited for. So the protagonist, Frey Holland, who's a young woman from New York who is mysteriously transported to this magical land of Athia, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She uses magical powers to journey through and survive this treacherous and new mysterious world to her. She doesn't understand how she got there, she doesn't know if there's a way back home, but she keeps basically her hopes up, and she meets different characters. She realizes that this world is basically in a tyrannical corruption led by two very powerful witches, and she decides to help the folks in this land to sort of free them from this tyranny. As far as we're concerned, this is the story. Now what I will say is I played a demo, and this is where I actually started to be a bit more concerned when I actually played the demo a few times. The reason being is not necessarily because it was bad, but it's because there was nothing that sort of dropped my jaw. Now it's also very important to note that in the demo we only have access to two separate groups of magic. I believe red magic is earth magic, which is Frey's magic, and the purple magic is the sentient cuffs, basically, that cuff that she has around her arm. It's a sentient entity, I suppose, and it has its own magic. Now both of these have different abilities, different power moves, different super moves. Every single time I was in a battle scenario when I was using these different spells, it just, to me, it felt so much like infamous Second Son. Like Delson's smoke abilities and concrete abilities is basically what Frey's magic abilities are in this demo anyway. Now we have a few abilities. I know that there's over like 100 spells altogether. I believe in the game we get to play around with like 10 of them, or maybe including the super moves, maybe like 13, 14 of them. Having said that, it really did remind me of infamous Second Son. The way it feels, the way it plays, the way the kind of combat works. It seems like that the enemy types are divided into two different groups in this demo, and depending on who you fight, you need to swap around your spells. So some, for example, some enemies will be more vulnerable to red magic, some will be more vulnerable to purple magic. I know that there's green magic and blue magic, I believe. I could be wrong. Is it green and purple, maybe? And I would assume that in the game, in the final release, there will be also enemies that will be vulnerable to those. What really caught me, though, is that if you're using the wrong type of magic against someone, it's not only that it doesn't do that much damage, it just doesn't work whatsoever. Like, if you use the wrong magic type against an enemy, it just doesn't work. It takes like that much out of their health. However, if you're using the right type of magic, it literally just kills straight on. So what I found is the strategic element in this game is actually just knowing which magic to use where. And I know that that sounds obvious, but when you're actually playing that, it just becomes an arcade shooter of knowing what to shoot where, and it's basically that's that, you know? You might be thinking, well, Norbs, actually, well, that's how games work. Well, not really. Let me give you an example. Again, in infamous Second Son, right? You've got smoke abilities, you've got neon abilities, you've got concrete abilities, and you've got this radio ability, okay? Now, all of these abilities work on pretty much all of these enemies that there are in the game. There are specific examples when it doesn't, but those are specific examples, either boss battles or other rare encounters, okay? Usually you can take on any enemy with any ability. However, the way you take on that enemy will change depending which ability you're using. So with smoke is more like an offensive weapon, right? You just burst, you rapid fire, you know, you just kill whatever you see. With neon, it's more about precision, right? You hit them in the head, you hit them in the leg, and it's basically a one-shot kill at that point. So all of these abilities, you can use these abilities to take on whoever, but the way you have to use these abilities is where it kind of mixes things up. That's where it becomes a more player skill level, because you as a player have to be either precise, or if you know you're not precise, you're gonna have to rely on an ability which isn't necessarily about precision, it's more about rapid fire. But then again, there are positives and negatives to using that in certain situations. In this game, it's literally none of that. It is like a card matching game. It's like, oh, red hearts, oh, black spade. That's how it feels. That's how the spells feel. Like, there is no, you can't really play around with them. Now, another thing that kind of stood out to me personally is how underwhelming these spells actually look. I'm not saying they are ugly, however, when a AAA game is about spells, right, I would expect the spells to look good, and they don't. The particle effects are at best mediocre, especially when we consider PlayStation 5. I mean, let's look at games like Returnal, where we've got these amazing, colorful, trance-like battles with like bosses that look amazing. You know, that's something what I expected, and not only because I'm a spoiled gamer, it's because this is what the trailers of the game actually suggested. So to go in and see how underwhelming these spells are is a little bit disappointing. Now I completely understand that we only experience 2 categories and only some spells from each category, okay? I understand that. However, why should I assume that the other 2 is going to be the game-breaking one? If these 2 are not that good, why should I, as a gamer, assume that, oh, never mind, it's probably the ones that they left out that's going to amaze me? Like, when it comes to ray tracing, it's the same kind of thing. There is no direct source of light in the game, so the light itself is very diffused in the skybox, okay? Now I understand that this is just a section of the map, and maybe some sections will have water in it, maybe some sections will have some sort of metallic objects or something that actually can reflect. When I turned on ray tracing, all that happened is 70% of my frames actually just disappeared. But I shit you not, I saw absolutely nothing that changed. There are these lanterns that you can find on like on towers randomly, just, you know, in the open world, which I actually tracked a few down just to see, and I stood there and I was on performance mode, and I went straight to ray tracing mode, back to performance, and the change I actually saw was so minimal, and the sacrifice of the frames were so huge that at that point I was thinking, what is going on here? Like, the ray tracing effects are not doing too much, obviously, because there's not much to reflect. The world isn't designed, at least this particular portion of the world isn't designed to have a lot of these ray tracing effects going on. If there's no direct lights coded into the game, those shine lights, so that ray tracing could do its job and do this real-time sort of reflections, if there's none of that and still it kind of takes away so much of your frames, I only wonder what happens in areas where there's actually water, where there's actually reflecting materials. Like, how is the game gonna run on that? Now I understand it's a demo, however, you have to understand that just because it's a demo, it doesn't mean it's a separate game. The demo will use the same foundation codes that we'll have in the actual game, in the actual released version of the game. So if the demo can handle ray tracing to this level, I have no reason to assume that the final game will actually handle it any better. Now, apart from the combat being underwhelming and the ray tracing being non-existent, the graphical fidelity is okay. Like, it looks good. There's nothing in there that kind of made my jaw drop, and that's a bit annoying because the trailers looked amazing. Now again, I understand this is only a section of the map, but you have to question, a demo is a demonstration. It's supposed to get the fans really excited. Why do you if let's say this is one of the most boring sections of the map, and you know, you just put it there because you don't want to spoil too much, but why would you do that? You know, you wouldn't necessarily spoil anything if you just allowed us to explore a little bit more interesting sort of terrains. Unless you're telling us two things. one, there are no interesting terrains because the entire world is just this ruined, sort of rocky planet. Or two, maybe there is one interesting terrain, but that's like endgame material, and the reason you're not allowing us to explore that is because you don't want to spoil the endgame area. So this is the two things I can actually think of. And I'm hoping I'm wrong, because I want this game to be so good. Now, again, having all this said, the fact that this game had numerous delays, the production was very rough. We've heard, possible cancellations before, and then obviously they said, no, actually, we're gonna do this. They delayed it multiple times. It kind of feeds into a narrative of a game that I really am hoping is not as bad as I think it will be. However, I have no reason to trust that this game is going to be the game they promised at launch anyway, right? Let's talk about Frey for a second. So Frey has these quirky conversations with this sentient calf. I forgot the name of it. And they have this very much like jokey, quirky kind of conversations mid-battles and also when they are exploring the world. Now, I understand that this is kind of like to connect with the player. The problem here is Frey's personality is as hollow as a coconut when all the juice is kind of sucked out of it, okay? I'm gonna have to compare Frey to Aloy a little bit because they are both female antagonists in a very dangerous world. Now, Aloy was born into this world. She learned how to hunt, she understood the dangers around her, and even though it was her nature, it was her home, that was, she was so used to it. And even she was always careful, even she was always sort of cautious. Like, a machine as small as a watcher, when she stealth killed one, she would say something like, let's not alert your friends. Because even she knew maybe 4 or 5 of those is dangerous. Even though she took down monumentally bigger machines. However, she understands that this world really is dangerous and she can't take it for granted. Whereas Frey, even though she was transported, she had no previous experience, she's not a warrior, she's an everyday woman, and yet now, like after God knows maybe a week, maybe a month of being in this world where she doesn't even really understand what's going on because she wasn't born in this world like Aloy was, right? But she's making jokes, she's like, easy, oh that was too easy, oh you want some, come get it, it's like. And for example, Miles Morales or Spider-Man, right, even, they do this in the Marvel Universe, but the Marvel Universe has a tone, it has a theme, right? And it's okay, because you play as Spider-Man, you play as someone who has these superpowers, who went through, the history of Spider-Man, that's why you understand their personality. We don't know the history of this person, we don't know who this girl was in New York. If I or you as a player was just instantly transported into a different world, I don't think you'd be making jokes right away. And the fact that Frey does, it kind of makes this dissonance feeling. You can't really relate to her, at least I couldn't during the demo period, because it's like, no, in this situation I would not make a joke about it was too easy or whatever, it's like she's so cocky from like, as soon as the demo starts, she's so cocky, so almost arrogant. And again, I understand that she's this hugely powerful woman who's just learning new spells and becoming more and more powerful as she encounters more areas and more of these wells where she can learn new spells. I get that, but at the same time, they don't really try to add her any emotional sort of layers as far as I'm aware. Now that could very well be different in the main game, and if it is, fair enough. I can only speak on what I've seen so far and what I experienced. Unfortunately, I do feel like that we are headed in the wrong direction. Do I think pre-ordering this game is wise? I don't think so. Now bear in mind, I pre-ordered it because I want to do a review on it. I want to experience the game from the first ever patch, from basically launch, right? Because, a game can be then corrected, it can be manipulated into something that's amazing a few months later on, As we know, as we've seen full well with like Cyberpunk, we've seen this with No Man's Sky, you know, we've seen this quite a lot. And because for me this game, it really did hit me when it first announced. I wanted this game to be so good, and now that I actually played the demo, I'm actually a bit worried. And I don't want anyone to spend their money and regret it, because obviously, as we know, on PlayStation you don't really get refunds just because you don't like the game, unless something monumental, game-breaking shit is happening. So, do I think you should pre-order this? I don't think so. Please wait for the reviews, not necessarily mine. If you don't want to, you can go IGN or Angry Joe or whatever your favorite YouTuber is. Wait for their reviews, because I think this is one of those cases where it really pains me to say this, but this could be a massive flop. Just based on all the details, based on the trailer, based on everything. And I really hope it isn't, because I really want this game to succeed. There are no signs that would tell me that this game is to be trusted as of now. And we're only 1 day away from launch, so, you know. Anyway, well, I'm still kind of waiting for the launch, and I hope you're excited for this game. I don't want to shit on it, that's not my intention. My intention is to really speak my mind about how I feel about this, because I don't really want to glorify a game that then turns out to be shit, just because I think it's a good concept or a good idea, or just because I enjoy it personally. Having said that, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a like, and subscribe to the channel for more awesome videos in the future. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.